Claudia Deloff shared the family history of her great-great-grandparents, Barney Gallagher, who was born in 1837 and died in 1916, and Martha Johnson Gallagher, who was born in 1851 and died in 1931. Bernard Gallagher, an Irish immigrant, arrived in Oregon country in 1857 at the age of 20 and settled with a land grant near what is now the former settlement of Frankfort, near Grays River on the Columbia River. That area was called Barney's Point by settlers. He built a boat landing there and was a pioneer seiner. In 1874, he married Martha Johnson, a Mayflower descendant, and they moved to their homestead on Young's River. They were farmers, but Barney also had substantial holdings in several Astoria canning firms, including Columbia Packing Company, Fisherman's Packing Company, and the White Star Cannery. They had 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls. Some of the sons owned the Imperial Grill on Commercial. Magnus and Bill were employed by August Erickson and worked in the famous Portland bar, Erickson's Saloon, which is known for Shanghai. And Bill later established Bill's Tavern in Cannon Beach. Here's Claudia's story.
I'm Claudia Thompson Deloff. My Finnish family, Swedish family, and Irish family are all from here. And so I will talk about my great-great-grandfather, Bernard Gallagher. Bernard's family was like most Irish families, I assume, in the mid-1800s. He and his brothers came to America. He was born in 1837, came to the United States when he was about 16 on a ship with his brothers and sisters and his grandfather, and eventually made his way over to the West Coast. He worked in mines. He worked in Virginia City. He was in Alaska working gold mines there. So he came to Oregon country in 1857. He actually settled across the river. It's like when you're going to go over to Nacelle. It's an inlet there. And he bought some land there. He was well known to the fishing community, and that's why they called that area Barney's Point. And then he would come back and forth to Astoria. And I don't know how he met my great-great-grandmother, because she was from Portland. But they married. He was a Irishman, and she was a staunch Catholic whose family came on the Mayflower. So they settled in Astoria. They had 6 children. His daughter was my great-grandmother. And one of her brothers was Bill, who owned Bill's Tavern in Cannon Beach, which is still there. He was involved in the canneries in the early century of early 1900s. And I believe he died in 1916, and they lived in Young's River. He had a brother who lived here also, whose name was James. He was a Civil War veteran. He's buried in Astoria somewhere, but Lisa Penner from the Historical Society said that part of Ocean View Cemetery is no longer. That's what they're trying to excavate and find burials out there, because they believe that was an old cemetery. It said in his will that he was to be buried over there, and that they took a boat from here, because there was no other way to get out to there, and that's where they had the burial. That's where my great-great-grandparents, the Gallaghers, were buried at Greenwood Cemetery, but their daughter Nora decided that she wanted them all at Ocean View, so she had family transferred over to Ocean View. My father's family, who owned the Astoria Granite Works, are all on a hill at Ocean View Cemetery, and right across the driveway is my mother's, the Gallagher family. My father's side is Finnish, and my grandparents each came from Finland to Quincy, Massachusetts when they were 16, 17. They didn't know each other, met there, married, had a couple of kids. He worked in a granite quarry, like a lot of the Finns did. And then they went to Rockland, California, where he worked in a quarry there. And he actually did the curb work for redoing San Francisco after the earthquake. And then he heard from a Finnish friend that Astoria didn't have a granite works. So he came to Astoria, established the Astoria Granite Works in 1917, sent from my grandma and the four children they had. And then when they got here, I had another aunt born here, and my uncle was born in 1924. My dad was the last child, born in 1927. And so they owned the Granite Works until the mid 90s. Same location. They raised 7 children in that upstairs apartment. My uncle worked as on the staging grounds. He was married to my oldest aunt, and he was born in about 1907. So he, as a teenager and young adult, worked on the staging grounds with horses, and he got paid to work the whole summer, $5. But if you stayed on for an extra 2 weeks after Labor Day or something, they got like an extra 50 cents or an extra $1. He worked out there, and he said how the horses' feet would get rotten after a while. You know, they're in semi-salt water. It's quite a lot of salt. And it was hard work. He said it was very hard work, but it was a really good paying job. I was born and raised here. I was mostly a medical transcriptionist, and then I worked at Astoria Fire Department. I had a wonderful life here, absolutely childhood life. Couldn't have been better. I had 16, 17 cousins and first cousins that were like brothers and sisters. When we were little kids, my mom would say, well, the CRPA cannery in Uniontown would blow the whistle at 8 a.m. and for the workers to begin, and that's when my dad went to work at the Granite Works. And I would say, we're leaving. My mom would say, well, you be home at the noon whistle. Or if it was afternoon, she'd say, well, you be home by the 5 o'clock whistle. And we had a sailboat at the West End Mooring Basin, and we would take our fishing tackle. We had fishing poles. We'd go to the Bond Street Market, and they had a butcher shop, and we'd go in and say, could we have 5 cents worth of liver? And he would give us this big, huge slab of liver. And we'd go sit on our boat at the West End Mooring Basin and fish. And then we would take the ferry. Just us kids. My cousin lived next door to us. We would walk down to the ferry landing, take our bikes, and just get on the ferry and go back and forth. And you could go for, I think it was like 25 cents. And if you got the big ferry, you got hamburgers, and they were like 35 cents. And it was always our favorite time if it got stuck on a sandbar, because then you had to sit out there and wait. We lived on a huge hill on Lincoln, and we would go up on West Grand and start at the top and then slide down on our sleds into good old Mr. Wilson's yard and go flying off. And we had a nice childhood and didn't lock the doors or anything like that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.